Okay, to understand what the daylighting is here, I'm going to go through and take this over to Green Building Studio, or excuse me, Ecotech, just so I can sort of see what's happening with the lighting that's kind of going on here. So, to do that, it has some great tools which help us understand and analyze the amount of lighting. I'll kind of just minimize that, and I'll open up Ecotech again. And just bring that in. I'm going to import. Actually, let me do this. Since I saved that out there, let me do this for you guys. If you want to follow along and you haven't been following along so far, let me just add, upload a file. I'm going to go out there and where did it go? There it is, session 4 start. Put that out there for you. Okay, so that one's out there too. If you want to download that and work with my file, you can. So I got this space. We're looking pretty good. I do have to do one other thing. There's always that thing. It really annoys me that I have to go through and open and save it just in Notepad, just to kind of clear up the issue of how the text files save. But let me do it because there's really no fighting with it. I will just right-click on this. I will say open with, and again, what I do is I just open with Notepad, and then I just go back and just save right on top of what it used to be. Thank you to whoever figured this out last time. It made a difference about whether I was on the PC side or the Mac side. I'm going to save as, I'm going to save it as UTF-8. That's just sort of a file encoding thing. Okay. Text looks the same, but Ecotech can read it better now. And I'll go to Ecotech, I'll say import this thing, grab the model. Where did it go? It's kind of, oh, it's not a mod file, it's an XML file. Popping out here, say OK. With any luck, we have a big room. You'll notice we do have some different wall material types and roof types, and it's actually tried to be very accurate about pulling that information across in terms of the different types. I'll say open that or import the existing, doesn't really matter at this point. Okay. That is our surface. You'll notice that as we're looking at it here, it has really 2 zones to it in terms of what it's being considered. There's one zone which is the big conditioned space. There's another zone which is it's just this little bit of overhang, that little bit of overhang. It's considered a shading surface. So it's in here now. And we can go ahead and sort of analyze this space. Again, we can look at the thermal properties. That's not what we're going to look at today. Today what we're going to look at is actually just the issue of the daylighting. And really, for these 6 windows, really try to understand how much daylighting is penetrating into the center of that space. Because in a minute, we're going to go ahead and add and make some changes and try to improve on it. So I know it's going to be a little bit weak right now, but let's take a look at it. How you analyze daylighting in this tool is under this tool right here, the little blue thing, it looks like a grid. Okay, we have the option of basically being able to go through and put an analysis grid that will report different values for us. And what we're going to do is actually go through and put a grid in here, and then based on that, we're going to sort of compute the daylighting value. So for the sun outside, how much is actually reaching the inside of the building? And how you do that is you say, oh, let's go down to auto fit grid. We can really say that it wants to be, well, in this case it says fit the grid to the selected objects. Yeah, we're all visible objects. What I would have to do is select it. Let me just say that's okay. Okay. You'll see it's going to put a little grid in there. Now, you'll notice the grid that's in there actually isn't exactly down on the floor. This is something that we actually just sort of do from a daylighting analysis standpoint. When we compute daylighting for a building, we don't sort of measure the floor. We actually measure, like almost 2 feet up. That's considered like a desk height or some common working surface height. So it's up there. If you're in the metric system, it's typically 600 millimeters. But we put a little plateau up a little bit higher because we're interested in the daylighting on that plane. Okay, so let's pause there for just a second and give everyone a chance to catch up. Do most people have a building and some sort of grid? Or if not, let's go ahead and like fan out and see if we can help people get a grid. I'm looking at grids, that's looking good. What's happening back here?
Yeah.
Oh, and it's we're in the Mac, yada, yada, yada.
Oh no, actually I'm working on this.
Got it?
So,
Okay, so let's think about this in terms of did you go through and open it in Notepad and save it as UTF?
Oh, okay.
See if you can do that. So open it, so right click and open it in Notepad and save as with UTF. I'm looking at grids, you're looking pretty good. You want to put a grid in there? To do that, let's just choose the blue guy. Okay, and then we'll say auto fit a grid. Okay, and then within, that's fine, and say okay. Very good. So most people got a grid. I'm looking at lots of blue grids. Almost. Okay, you got a grid in a small space, right? No worries. Go back to this thing that says auto fit the grid. It's this guy right there. And then let's say within, and then like just say okay again. See if we can get it to there we go. It sort of manually placed one in just a small square, and now you want to get the whole boundary. Beauty. Okay, over here looks like we need a little help auto fitting our grid here too. So what we're going to do is, you look good. Oh, no, what it is it's a save. Are you with it? So do save as again. And it's this encoding right there. That's the one that gets you in trouble. This is like my machine where don't you hate it when you lose a key? Yeah. It's like I understand. Okay, how about you for a grid? We need to get a grid in there? Go to the blue guy. And we'll say auto for the grid. And then we will say within, say okay. And we'll put a grid. Okay, beautiful. You're ready to analyze. Okay, I'm looking at a lot of good. Okay. Yep. That's fine. Okay, and now go to the grid tool. And we'll put that grid in there for you. So auto fit the grid. And within is fine. And we say okay. Okay, you're looking good. Got a blue one there, hit the OK, I think it'll be excellent. Okay, we got grids. With these grids, what we can do is actually compute some values. And how we're going to compute these values is as follows. What we are going to do is, in this tool, we have this whole choice of really what we want to calculate. We are going to calculate lighting levels, which is actually the default choice right now. If you kind of scroll on down there. Okay. In this little lighting level thing, we'll click the perform calculations, and we'll walk through a little bit of a wizard, but we're not really going to change anything in it, so we'll skip it next time. We get to sort of say what we want to compute. I'm going to change it to natural lighting levels. Actually, I'm lying. We are going to change something. Not that it really will. If we had artificial lights, it would take that into account. I'm just going to go for natural lighting. We want to compute all over the analysis grid. That looks good. We get to sort of say something about the precision with which we want to do this. We're going to do something relatively quick, so I'm just going to leave it in the middle. We have the idea of really what is the illuminance in the sky. That is how much sun, how bright is the sky. And by default, okay, it's setting up 789.7, so about 790 foot candles. There's this notion of brightness that we can measure in terms of foot candles. That's the unit that we use in the British system. Yeah, that is, if you had a candle with a single firelight and you were 1 foot away, it's the amount of light that you're getting from that candle one away. So this is basically saying the sky is like 800 candles. Okay?
I have a different unit, NUX.
Oh, no worries. Okay, you got lux.
Yeah.
Okay, lux is fine. We got that. That's just the British system. In terms of, it's just another way of doing it. Okay, so that's okay. We'll talk about how to change it later, but lux is fine. Yeah, it's just a different calibration. Okay. We have this whole notion. It's kind of, I always love this, only because it's so silly, but it's true. You know, are your windows perfectly clear because you're out there washing them every day, or are they a little schmutzy? And you see my car, they're very schmutzy. Average is kind of somewhere in between. You get to decide, you know, how much you wash your windows. Okay. What kind of mode will go for regulatory compliance? That means we could submit it, and then we say okay. Okay, again, we won't do that again. But let's let it go through and do a few calculations. Looks like it actually completed the calculations. Is that actually true? actually very good in terms of the scheme of what's going on here. Let's see if you got anything different. Basically, what this is showing is, as a range, I think probably what's happening is I have some things that are sort of biasing the range here. The grid's almost hanging outside the outside, so it's picking up a little bit of excess sort of space over here. But if you look at the grid, what you're seeing is almost all of it is blue. You might see that right in front of the windows it's a little bit purple. Okay, and on this scale over here, blue being 0.02, purple being like 12.2, 30 or 40, let's talk about what this scale is. The daylighting factor is actually, it's the percentage of how bright it is in the space compared to the outside. Okay, so at 0.2%, it's pretty dark. At 12%, if there's 800 foot candles outside, you got about 80 foot candles inside at that location. So it's just a relative percentage. Okay, does that sort of make sense? Now, this scheme over here, in terms of the coloration and stuff like that, it's sort of color graded based on minimum to maximum. Because some value in here is relatively high, around 60, it's sort of very dark blue here throughout most of it. If I want to sort of see a little more variation, I can actually just change the bounds here. Okay, so instead of going 0 to 60, what if I only said just colorize it based on the notion of like 0 to 15 or something like that? And what do I have to do to get it to do after that? Daylight factor 0 to 15, that's fine. I want it to go through and recompute. It's still not there. Hang on this. Let me try this here. Make it to 3. I have to hit the enter or something. There it is. Okay. Make it like 10, something like that. The enter key. What you'll see is this will give you a little more information. You can see by the windows that the amount of the daylighting factor is right around 6, something like that. But it really, it depletes very, very quickly. This lighting is not getting very deep into the building at this point. Okay, and there's reasons for that. We're going to go through and try to fix that. You know, as you go through and look at this, there's different things we can do. If you don't just want to see this notion of kind of these hard grids, we can actually go through and turn on contours. Let me show you what that looks like. I can say show contour lines, and then even sort of put contours not every 6. Let me put it every 1. You sort of get a slightly more accurate model of how the light is tapering off. But you basically get the idea here that there's a little bit of light by the windows, but there's really not much, very much getting back into the center of the space. So, just in terms of thinking about daylighting, let me give you a standard of what you have to go for. Okay? If you want to go ahead and say that your building is LEED certified from a daylighting standpoint, you have to make sure that the area of the building, or the area of the room, or the overall area of the building, okay, that at least 75% of it, okay, has at least 2% daylighting. Okay? So in this building right here, like for example, blah, 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 I did that kind of clip to the minimum. What I could do is, for example, say that the minimum is 2, and then clip to the minimum. Okay, and you'll see that of the 75% of the area, only that area would qualify right now. So this building is not going anywhere near LEED right yet. Okay, we need to go through and fix it. It's not a very well daylight building this standpoint. Okay, but that's enough to get us going. Yeah.
Why do certain windows let in more? Like if they're the same windows and say on the same side of the building, relatively close together, why do they let in more or less light?
They should be really just about the same amount of light. It's really, are yours kind of looking a little bit different in terms of, Let's kind of see if we can figure it out. I don't know, because they should be, your intuition is right. You sort of picture an infinite amount of light out there going through the opening.
Especially as this layer 2, they're put out
Interesting. I don't have a good answer for that. It could just be something about the size of the grid and just kind of how the points are resolving relative to the resolution we're doing it. Your intuition is right. It should be the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Same problem, like some windows are not like
Not at all.
Yeah,
Don't know. Again, I'm going to guess it probably has something to do with the resolution of something. But again, don't worry about it too much just yet. We'll sort of approach it more, qualitatively, and then we'll sort of start refining that on down.
What are the contours? If I change the lights.
Yeah. So contours it's really, let me kind of zoom in on you and kind of show you what the contours are. The contours are, let me see if I can get this zoomed in. I'm going to pan that up. The contours are supposed to be as best I can. Of my value going 4 to 10, I'm basically saying put a contour at every one. Well, it seems to have a lot more contours in there now, so I'm wondering how it sort of works in terms of the overall scaling. But as that number gets bigger, you'll have fewer contours. It's almost like contour lines on a topo map. So if I put 2 in here, I should get something that's much, grosser. If I put 6 in here, that should be very gross in terms of kind of only when it sort of crosses a big boundary. If I put 0.1 in there, that's almost a little too fine. Okay, just get a little bit more contour in there. Okay, so at a high level, the big message here is this building, there's a way of looking at it to sort of understand that it really is not very well lit. Okay, and let's go ahead and back and talk about how to go through and fix that. Because we can fix it in a number of different ways. We can fix that by going ahead and adding more windows all the way around. We can fix that by kind of putting a kind of curtain wall in, which is an awful lot of windows. A lot of ways we can fix this. So let's go back over to Revit, and we'll talk about improving that daylighting a little bit. So let's go back over to the Revit side and kind of adapt our model a little bit. So I'm going to go over to 3. Okay, so one thing we might be tempted to do is, okay, I need more light in here. Maybe I need some curtain wall, something like that. So let's talk about curtain wall and how we can go through and use that. So if I come on in and I'm just going to sort of look at a section of the building, maybe I'll kind of look at just half of the building for now. Maybe I can wrap around a little bit. I'd like to go ahead and put some sort of curtain wall in here and see what the effect of that is. So I could put more individual windows. If I want to do a curtain wall, there's a number of ways I can do that. You could go ahead and just draw a new curtain wall. What I often do when I have a building like this, I want to swap in curtain wall for a section, is I'll just choose a wall and I'll split the wall. So just using the split tool, we can kind of cut a section and then change part of that to curtain wall. So let me show you what I mean. I'll grab my little cut tool. It's like a little X-Acto knife. I'll come on down and I'll leave a little bit of solid wall on the end. But I have a seam right now where that part of the wall can actually be changed right now. So what I'm going to do with that is actually go over to the wall types. And I'll change that to storefronts. Storefronts is a curtain wall that has a little bit of glazing to it. It also has some mullions to it. It's not a bad surface. Go ahead and pan this over. I'm going to actually change this other little wall around the corner also to be a curtain wall. I'll get sort of a nice, hopefully, kind of nice little glass corner in the building. So again, we'll change that. I'll make that into a curtain wall. Storefront. Okay. So I got something. So my suspicion now is that's going to be a very bright corner in the scheme of things. Okay. If you want to, you could also go ahead and start thinking about other places in the building you might want to change things to be curtain walls. For example, on this back part over here, maybe I want to split some of that. I'll kind of split from here to here. I'll make a nice curtain wall just at the back of the building. Choose that. Kind of make it a curtain wall also. Okay, what are curtain walls? They're really just like big wall systems made up of a whole bunch of different windows. So all the same problems. It's glazing. It tends to have a very low U value or R value. A lot of heat's transmitting to it, but a lot of light's going to come through that. So let's start with that. We'll just sort of optimize light, then we'll figure out how we kind of guard against that too. So here's my basic building now. Okay, I might want to just go ahead and test this out. Actually, let's test different strategies. This side, I'm over here, I'm kind of testing the strategy. What happens if I go ahead and put a lot of curtain wall on the sides? That's kind of an interesting strategy. We'll see how that works in the daylight. Maybe on the other wing of the building here, I could test, well, what's the effect of skylights? What if I put some skylights in there? How effective are they at bringing daylight into the building? So maybe to test that, what I'll do is go out there and grab in my little window tool that I have to load. And if I remember from last time, because I was supposed to learn, I go to the windows and choose skylight, and I should get a skylight with any hope. And it loaded. Okay. Skylight, you'll see we have some nice little small skylights. We have some bigger, ooh, look at big skylights, 4x4. I like that. So I'm just going to go ahead and put a couple of them kind of in the center of the space. I think it's 2 for now. And just kind of like a roof window. So we'll take a look at that. So I'm doing a little experimentation here to see really what might be the best strategy. Some skylights on this side, some curtain wall on that side. Just a little bit to play around with. Okay, so I'm going to take that same building and run it on over to Ecotech so we can take a look at it now with these skylights and these curtain walls instead. So because of this building, yes?
The corner of like my curtain walls don't meet, is that gap gonna be affected in the ecotech?
It would affect it in terms of a thermal standpoint, so we'd have kind of a gap. Let's see if we can kind of stretch them and bring them together. Well, you take a look and see if you can make them join up. You might have to trim them or something, or sometimes I pull them apart from each other and I bring them back together again. It's one of those sort of things. But if you got a basic looking building and you're looking good, you can just go ahead and bring it right to Ecotech. I'm going to export it and I'll put this new file out on the file server. So again, if you didn't do the modeling, you can keep on going in Ecotech. Take a look at that. So let me do this. Okay, don't need to put a room in again. I already got that. You know, kind of set up the basic parameters. Let me go ahead and export this. I'll export my GBXML. It's looking pretty good. Actually, let's talk about sort of a small thing you may want to sort of pay attention to here. It won't be so important yet, but there's this notion of how much complexity you want to put into the model. Simple, which is what it is by default, or simple as shading surfaces, says, you know that big old curtain wall you put in there? I know it's a bunch of panels, but let's just simplify. I'll just call it one big piece of glass. Okay, which would speed up the calculation a little bit, because it only has to consider it one surface. But, you know, it kind of loses some information along the way. What I'm going to do is actually shift it up a little bit to complex or complex with shading surfaces. That'll actually say all those individual panels will be treated a little bit differently. So if on one panel it's perfectly clear glass, it'll be treated that way. If on another panel it's solid or translucent glass, it'll be treated appropriately and transmit the light to the real qualities. So I'm going to ratchet it up to complex with shading surfaces. Just take it one step further up. 2 steps, I guess. Okay, but that's what complex does. Say next. I'm going to say session 4 with curtain walls and skylights. Save out that XML file. And then again, so you guys can follow along in case you weren't modeling. Let me go ahead and just put that up on coursework. So I'm going to add this up in there, upload the files. Where are we going to go out to Dropbox? There it is, curtain walls and skylights. Or put it up there. It's on my desktop. Oh, yes, I hold the copyright to this incredibly valuable design that I don't want anyone stealing because it's just that good. Okay. In the same sense, I am going to go through and open it in Notepad so I can kind of do that. And I'll save it as, and hopefully this will be fairly familiar looking to you. Yes. Okay, we'll go back into Ecotech and we'll open this one instead. So I'm going to open this thing or import a model analysis. Go out there to my desktop. Take a look at it. There it is, curtain walls and skylights. Same things are kind of coming in. I'll open it as a new file. If I import it into the existing, it'll put it right on top of the old one. Oops, actually I don't want to save the changes. Hang on. Import. Da-da-da. Desktop, come on out there, curtain walls, say okay. Open as new, don't save the changes. Okay, there we got it. So you'll see now I have this version. You can sort of see it has the skylights, it has all these panels, it has kind of the breaks in the glass. We're ready to go ahead and analyze this thing now. Okay, how you doing on your side? You ready to analyze this thing? Some of you I bet have already analyzed this thing. So let's go and see how this looks like. I'm going to, in the same sense, go to the grid. Say that I want to auto-fit a grid to the selected objects. Looks like I'm not selecting anything. Let me try that again. Auto-fit, selected objects. Hang on, what am I not selecting? Within all visible objects? Okay. Still not. Let me try this. If I really want to control this precisely, I can choose the floor within the selected objects. Let's try that. Okay, why is it not showing for me? How are you doing on yours? Are you seeing a grid on yours?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, some of you have grids. I don't have grids. I'm going to figure out why I don't in just a second. There's clip to minimum. Ah, it's the clip to minimum turned on. I think I would have been okay. Clip to minimum is still sort of left. It's because everything was kind of currently 0 or something like that. It was just not showing the grid. Okay. We got this thing. You ready to analyze? Okay. This time, since you already done it once before, we can say perform the calculation. And this time I'm just going to skip the wizard. You sort of know what the wizard's going to do. Say okay. Let's set this thing click away.
For the lead qualification that you mentioned,
Yes.
is that it needs 75% at a certain time of day?
Actually, the goofy thing is about the way daylighting analysis is, it's actually time of day independent. They just sort of assume it's an average for what the daylight value is kind of throughout the day. There's kind of a standard kind of amount of what they consider to be sun in the sky. And it's considered to actually kind of come in from all sides equally. So it's a little different. It's not sunlighting, and sunlighting is very specific to time of day and location. But you notice like daylighting actually comes in from the north as well as from the south. And it's kind of this really weird quality. Notice that sometimes that even in a room, if you look at a north window, there's still light coming in, even if it's not sunlight.
Yeah.
It's not just daylight. And it's So it's actually time independent. It's actually time. It's day independent too. Okay, just an average. Okay, so you'll see we're doing a little bit better over here. We got, so down here in this corner, boy, it's like 37% of the sunlight over here. It kind of starts tapering off. Here it's like 19 or 20%. Let's take a look at this. I'm going to sort of reduce the scale again a little bit. Make this top of the scale, say 40. Just so it's a little more intense, or 30, something like that. Again, if I want to show the contours, I can. That just gives me, again, that information to sort of see where it tapers off. So I can sort of see where the hot zone is, the cooler zone, kind of where the relatively dark zone is. But as you look at this, what do we sort of see? This curtain wall is kind of pretty effective about bringing light in here. The skylights, somewhat effective. Okay, not necessarily doing a great job yet. We might have to do a little work with that to kind of make them more effective. This isn't so bad. This is bringing daylighting in, but let's think about it. This is actually 30% of the outside daylight. So let's talk about that. Daylighting factor is a percentage of the outside daylight. Okay, and 30% sounds like it's pretty good, but another way to look at it is something called just the daylighting level. And that's actually like, it's almost like 100-watt bulb versus 60-watt bulb. It sort of gives you kind of an equality of the intensity of the light into something that's a little more easy to relate to. It actually is completely related. It's just a mathematical formula. But the daylighting level here is now going anywhere from up to 400-foot candles over here to about 8-foot candles over there. So let's talk about what that means. Okay, it turns out, and we'll show you some charts next time, that there are daylighting levels that are recommended for different spaces. So if we are hanging around in the lobby of the building, a good sort of general level is kind of 20 to 40 foot candles. Okay. And that's actually, you know, kind of, doesn't have to be too bright. We're just reading a magazine out there, something like that. We're hanging out. We're not really doing too much. Yeah. If we're going to be working intensely, I'm going to be back there at my desk and reading and writing and doing a lot of stuff. We tend to need a higher level of daylighting there. So it'll usually be around like 80 foot candles or something like that. Quite a bit lighter than it is at the lobby. Okay? So the more intense the work it is that you want to do, the higher you want to be. So 80 foot candles, 100 foot candles, super. Your high intensity desk lamp at home, you know, that's like 120, 150, something like that. Now, by the time you start getting up over 200 foot candles, something like that, that is, you know, you're on Law and Order and they got the bright light in your face and they're interrogating you because they want you to sweat and finally just give up because it's just that uncomfortable. So that's sort of what 200 foot candles is. 400 foot candles is like, oh my God, I'm sitting out in the baking sun. For me, this is a big issue. It starts getting to be very uncomfortable. You're sweating and it just feels kind of bad and you're feeling your skin bake and stuff like that. So, relative to what's going on here, I got some daylighting coming back in here. You know, back in here it's 80, that's good. Back in here it's more 40. That's not so bad. You know, it's 20 back, you know, it's kind of okay. Back over here though, might be getting just a little bit intense. Okay, and if you have ever sat in this building by those big plate glass windows on that side where the entrance is, you know it ain't exactly a great place to be sitting around like 2 in the afternoon or something like that. It actually does get just too intense. So there is such a thing as too much daylight. So what we start trying to get into is actually, okay, daylighting is our friend, but we want to start moderating the daylight and controlling it and making sure that, you know, we're kind of using it most effectively. Okay, so let's talk about how we can do that. Let me just demonstrate something. Tuesday when we come back, we'll actually get a chance to go through and play with it some more in terms of dealing with it. So I'm going to go back over my Revit model and just kind of show you kind of approaches to sort of moderating the sunlight or moderating even the daylight. So one thing that we sort of pay attention to is with the sun and dealing with the sun. It's really the whole notion of, you know, how can we control it and get a little more, yeah, just kind of control over the whole thing. One of the very first things we'll often try to do is actually play around with these roof overhangs. Because roof overhangs can be sort of a very useful thing. And let's talk about the theory of roof overhangs. And to do that, I'm just going to turn on the sun. And I'm even going to move it around in the sky a little bit. Okay, I'll do it as though I'm kind of hanging around in June for right now. Okay, and let me see if I can kind of orbit this around a little bit. So as I'm hanging around there in the morning, it's not looking too bad. Let me kind of change this up a little bit later in the afternoon. If I go to like, say, 1 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock or even noontime or something like that, let's take a look at what's going on there. Actually, it's not so bad. Oh, that's because, well, let's talk about this. I got my roof over here. Let me edit my roof. If I pulled my roof right back to the edge, okay, I'd start having this issue. Well, actually make it a little bit later in the day. That'll actually be a little bit better because this is a little bit still kind of high in the sky. At noontime, the sun's very high in the sky. Let me make it a little bit later, say like 3 in the day, afternoon. Okay, at 3 in the afternoon, what's happening is the sunlight's actually kind of coming through that glass pretty well. It's actually coming this way, it's coming through the glass. Things that are over here on the side are actually in the direct sun at this point, okay, which may or may not be comfortable. Okay, so to moderate for that, what we tend to actually do is go through and put longer overhangs on the building. So when you have the south side of a building and you actually start thinking about what makes the most sense for the overhangs or the sunny side of the building, depending upon what part of the earth you're on, okay, what you often do is you see people doing this. They'll extend the overhangs out on the sunny sides, okay, to the point where, okay, the shadows of the overhang of the roof actually creates a shadow, so you can actually kind of keep the inside of the space looking okay. Now, you might wonder about that because in the summertime I wanted to cut out that sun, but in the wintertime I kind of wanted that sun. So how does this actually work? And what actually happens is this. If I kind of zoom back out, let me see if I can show you the sun path. Here we are, we're hanging around. This is the summertime. The summertime, the sun is relatively high in the sky. That's kind of looking pretty good. The winter's very different though, and this is really the beauty of kind of passive solar design and how we can actually use overhangs to our advantage. If I shift it over to like December as opposed to June, the sun is actually much lower in the sky. And when the sun is much lower in the sky, the way it hits the building is actually just much lower. So here we are at 3 in the afternoon. Not sure if you can see in here. Even because the sun is lower, just the angle with which it's hitting the building, it's actually able to penetrate the building in the summertime, okay, where it isn't able to penetrate the building in the wintertime. Or this, able in the wintertime, but not in the summertime. Stuff like that. So roof overhangs are one of the things we're going to play around with in terms of thinking about facades and how to deal with facades. It's a very, very useful tool to kind of play with. The other thing we're going to start playing with, though, let me go ahead and back off my roof overhang, is actually the features of the curtain wall itself. Because you may be sort of used to seeing things that look like this now. Oh, if you go looking at a lot of the buildings on campus now and you see curtain walls, they don't look perfectly flat like this. They actually have fins and shelves and different things that sort of articulate, you know, kind of these mullions a little bit differently. So let me show you an example of what I might mean. So, for example, this mullion right now is currently set up, it's a little 2.5 by 5 inch piece of rectangular aluminum or something like that. Let me go ahead and change that. Let me go to, there's such a thing called profiles, and let me see if we can sort of figure out, oh, hang on, let's see if it, where is it, curtain wall mullions, rectangular, 2.5 by 5. Okay, let me try a different one here. Let me duplicate that. Let me go ahead and edit it, and actually change its properties. As opposed to being 5 inches, what if we actually made that something like 18 inches or 24 inches or something like that? So 2'0". Oops. Okay. Let me go ahead in here and change that to rename it to by 24 inches. Okay, and then go through and change that. Hang on, what do I got to do there? Let me unpin it, change it, okay, and start introducing shelves like that. What we're starting to see in buildings is people going through and actually designing entire systems that have things like shelves like that on them. And the shelf actually has a couple of different benefits that we'll play around with last time. One is that we can actually bounce light off the shelf and reflect it back in to kind of bring daylight further into the building. The other being is we can actually sort of shade the building. So as opposed to putting a big roof overhang on here, let me try a slightly different system here. Let me edit this type and say that as opposed to being, oh, like the, that's interesting. It looks like, oh, that, as a, yeah, for the interior types, as opposed to being the little ones, now I'm gonna make the horizontal ones that, make them the big ones. Okay, maybe for the vertical grid spacing or the horizontal grid spacing, instead of 8 feet, we do it every 2 feet instead. But let me kind of show you what a system like that looks like. You start seeing buildings like this that actually have these shells and gridded systems for the whole thing. And next time we'll actually play around with this, going ahead and trying to just use different variations of kind of opacity of the curtain wall panels and different sort of features of the curtain gridding system to actually bounce light back in and shade light in as we need to. So you'll often see things like this. Another sort of panel system that you may see. Let me kind of go ahead and give you one other one in here. That's kind of more of a shaded system in terms of like the big grids going this way. Let me even go ahead and make that, every 1 foot. And say apply to that. But then let me duplicate this. I'll call this actually just my like horizontal shelves. Let me duplicate it. We can actually make another one where instead of doing the horizontals, we actually make vertical ones, like vertical fins. So what would that be? That would be, as opposed to all these horizontal shelves, let me go ahead and kind of just make those small and kind of bring it up to 8 feet again. But what we can do is on the vertical distance, or change those instead to again be a big fin sort of profile. So, and let me see, what did I do? I just made it the border. Let me make it the interior. Hang on. Border, border, border. It's up there. You think they'd put interior in the middle of the choices, but they don't. Okay, where'd it go? It's just the other one. So you start seeing systems like that. And if you start going around to any of the modern buildings on campus, if you go down, it's next to Clark. What's the new building next to on Clark? But almost any of the new buildings that have big curtain wall systems, start paying attention to this. Or even, I guarantee you this, when you go around the whole SEQ quad and you're kind of wandering around tomorrow, look at the different sort of features on the different sides of the building. Notice how the windows are defined on the south side of the building versus the east and the west side of the building. And what you'll actually notice if you're observant is actually these gridding systems are a little bit different on every side of the building. Okay, so just as a little clue in terms of what's going on, you'll often see that the curtain systems or the shelves that are sort of appropriate on the south side of the building are different than the ones on the east and west side. Okay, I'll leave it for you to go ahead and figure out which way is which. So come back on Tuesday and tell me, on the south side of the building, do the fins go horizontal or the fins go vertical? And similarly on the east and west. Okay, and from that, on Tuesday, we'll go ahead and introduce sort of what you're going to be doing in terms of your design work. So talk some more about how you use this kind of control to really get, not only articulate the facade, but actually a lot of control over just exactly, you want to control how much daylight, but also how much sunlight, and also the temperature. So how we get those 3 things to work together. Okay, beauty. Okay, let us break for tonight.